Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Happy to be here. Curious. What doth you two think about fudge? Today is National Fudge Day.
Where did that come from?
It's National Fudge Day.
Okay.
I don't know where
Eric,
National Fudge Day came
that
from.
question all the time. Where?
But I was just thinking
Fudge.
about like a couple places that are easiest to get it. I think are Shields and Cabela's. You know, they have those little
Fudge counters?
cut off like a slice of it, and
I don't know if that's what they're called, but that's a fun thing to say.
yeah.
So are you a fudge?
Go break
are
me
you a
off
fudge
a
lover?
piece of fudge.
I do enjoy a nice fudge. My one of my favorites is they have a like orange cream. Like I really like orange cream soda, orange cream anything, and so it's that day. So I was just thinking it'd be a great day to stop at one of those stores and get some fudge.
It's weird how many days there are if you the calendar that you have that you keep, because it seems like no matter what day we record, there is a holiday.
Yep.
You
International
always are
Waterfall Day as well
you're
today.
always prepared.
I
with
almost
these
went
random.
with the TLC intro, but I decided not to.
I haven't had fudge in a very long time. I can't even think of.
It's for me.
the
It's been
last
like
time.
a year. I would easily a year.
I'm sure
since
there's
I've
like
had
a
fudge.
TikTok microwave recipe for fudge or something like that.
Okay,
Sure.
serious question here though.
Yeah.
Because there's basically two options. You can get it's summertime, so ice cream cone season. Are you a fudge-sicle fan, or are you like the white ice cream
You have just
covered by
changed-
chocolate?
It's called vanilla, by the way.
vanilla
yeah.
ice cream
Oh no.
with like dipped in chocolate.
both
I feel like
of
they both
those-
look the same, but if you're
Yeah.
expecting the wrong one and you take the bite, then it's no good. So
It just depends on what mood I'm in. You
I'm
know?
a fudge-sicle all the way.
Same.
Okay.
But
100%.
I usually would pass on both.
You know
And
what
go
I
for
like?
the
Are
ice
we
cream
able to
cone.
talk about pudding pops? Those were good. Are those canceled with Bill
What
Cosby?
is that?
Or
Have I
just
had one? Push pop?
Pudding pops. They used to. I don't even know if they make them anymore. They were the best though. They were like a fudge sickle, but they had that Jello.
Eric, you just like always bring us back to like the vintage
I don't know. Can't help myself.
good things.
Love Jello pop.
I'm gonna have to look
Pudding
that
pops. Pudding pops. I don't
Did
know what
Wile E. Coyote or who was the
Okay.
coyote that you were talking about
No,
last
that's
week?
what I
Did he
was
sell
thinking.
those?
No, Wilbur was a pizza peddler.
Okay.
that was the coyote's
Pudding
job.
pops.
Did we have any voicemails this week?
We do have
Okay.
a voicemail. I will
Oh.
pull it up. Here it is.
Hi, I just moved to Omaha, and I'm wondering what is your guys' favorite restaurant in Omaha, and what is your favorite memory associated with it? Thanks.
Restaurant. Okay. Favorite restaurant. We've talked a little bit about restaurants
And
before.
favorite memory associated
and a
with
favorite memory associated. I'm trying to think. Does anybody have one just ready to go? Because I'm.
I don't know if it's my favorite restaurant, but I feel like I have like maybe like a top 5.
Okay,
So it's
but
in my top
we're
5.
asking for one.
So give
though.
us one
I know, I'm just
from
gonna
your
give you
top
one.
5 that
Okay,
has,
so
that
you're
has the
saying-
best memory, maybe.
So
Okay,
you're saying this
so I
isn't
feel
your
like
favorite though.
When I think of nostalgia, I think about Upstream
Okay.
because there was one out west that's no longer there, but there's one downtown in the old market. And I love their spinach artichoke dip, and they have like this beer cheese soup. You have to go.
Like, what's your
Try it.
memory? Your favorite memory
I'm
there?
sharing it, but like
You're rushing
you can be
her.
long-winded
Sorry.
in a second.
Way to put him in his
It's-
place.
So I love when so since I lived downtown for quite a long time with during college, anytime anybody came into town, I would always go there. So I have like a lot of good memories with family and friends, and like first times to Omaha, taking them to
Yeah.
Upstream, and they have a magician there. So I went so much that we went there for part of my bachelorette party when I was getting married, and there's like a magician that walks around and does a card trick.
Play a lot of billiards there, too, or no?
I've done that before. Yeah, you can do lots of different stuff there. Have you guys
right.
ever been?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have good root beer that they brew themselves as well. Alex, you have a restaurant?
I don't yet. I'm still
Really?
thinking. I'm trying to attach it to a memory.
Yeah, that's the tough part.
Okay, I'll give you crumble cookies.
It's not quite a
No,
restaurant.
it's
but-
not a restaurant.
Well, I feel like you could justify it.
I mean, cost is like eating a meal, but
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of just a favorite because I know what it is. It's Laos Thai Kitchen. It's in South Omaha. It's a Thai restaurant. I think it's family owned. Been there for a long time. I guess a memory tied to that is I would go there a lot for whenever I was just, like, someone was new to town or a family member was in town or I was meeting with friends for lunch. Like, we just had a lot of memories there, a lot of different things. It's just one of my favorite spots to take people. And I really like Thai food. So, yeah, Lowe's Thai Kitchen.
My answer is Bernie's Pizza. So Bernie's Pizza is this little tiny pizza joint in Millard, like old Millard. And so I remember going there as like a kid a ton. And I mean, it is like, when you went there, it was like stepping back into time. Bernie like ran it for decades, was the name of the gentleman. And like he always had the white, kind of ice cream shop looking hat on, all that kind of stuff. It closed down a few years ago, and then like his nephew ended up taking over for it. And so then we would go, my parents lived in an apartments by there for a couple of years. And so we would go only takeout now. So no longer to the restaurant, but it was amazing. Like just the taste, for me on pizza, crumbled beef is like, there's just something about that rather than just like little tiny mini meatballs or little nuggets. Yeah. Not to be confused with the world champion Denver Nuggets, but I digress.
Yes, you do digress.
But yeah, Bernie's Pizza. I mean, just a lot of memories going there. And then,
do you still get it today, or is the nephew not keeping up? Like it's not as good.
Yeah, it's just as good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's been my parents moved out of that place, so the proximity is not as close anymore. But it's one of those places that I like to. When you enjoyed something as a kid, and then you can have your kids enjoy it, and they actually like it. It's fun. So
yeah, I feel like Omaha has a lot of kind of, I wouldn't say obscure, but locally owned pizza places that other people just aren't. And it's like kind of that, I guess, Midwestern take on pizza. Because I think of Orsi's down that was by RIP, the old Grace University, where you got the big giant, huge sheet of pizza, rectangle pizza, and then there's
that's good.
Johnny, is it Sortino's? Yeah, that's kind of like
they actually built another one of those like 168th between Center and Pacific too.
Yeah. So, anyways, lots of pizza around here, I guess. But there's our answer.
Yep.
I hope we did a good job answering that question.
Let us know which one of those sounds the best, and maybe you'll get a gift card to there.
Probably not, but maybe. Or comment what your favorite. Help this person
Austin,
out who
what's your
called it.
favorite?
Oh yeah, Austin's here. Austin, what's your favorite restaurant? His favorite is Valentino's Pizza,
And he misses the old salad bar,
Valentino's,
the old buffet.
The Valentino's they had in Kearney was
it's either Valentino's or Runza. I'm just guessing it's one of those two. And he's shaking his head no, but we'll just let it. We'll pretend.
I don't believe it. Hey, another thing I just want to mention really quickly that I've kind of been teasing a little bit before. We'll take a break and we'll talk more about that in July or heading into July. Talk about it in the next couple episodes. But one of the things we're really hoping to launch in August this fall is the Uncomfortable Book Club, or maybe the Uncomfy Book Club. We haven't fully landed on a name. But just for those that maybe enjoy listening to the podcast and want to dive deeper into maybe some conversation. They're like, man, you guys are just off your rocker sometimes, and I'd like to talk more about that. Or that challenged me in some kind of way, or maybe some of the authors that we do have on here. I think one of the things I've loved most about being a part of this podcast, and we've heard some listeners share, is it challenges them to think about topics maybe they wouldn't consider, or read books that they would never consider, and maybe they don't end up agreeing at the end of the day, but it just challenges them in their growth and discipleship. So we have one of our listeners that's like, hey, I want to really maybe help lead this and be a part of those conversations with it, which I think is great. And so if you're interested in that, you can send us an email, podcast@cccomaha.org, or reach out to find Jess, Eric, or I anytime, and we can try to help connect you. But just want to keep putting that plug out there because I think it'll be an exciting discipleship move and a way for the podcast to continue to build and grow in that way. So
yeah,
there it is.
Good. All right, up next, Alex, you got an opportunity to sit down with Jarie Bolander, who recently wrote a memoir about caretaking of his wife who had a terminal illness and her passing. So please stay tuned for that.
Ladies and gentlemen, as promised, I'm joined today by Jarie Bolander, and so we're going to have a conversation today, really sharing his story. He's got a memoir. We'll talk more about that coming out in September 5th. That really was going to outline this in more detail. And so I'm sure some of the questions that might linger that a listener has might get answered inside of that. But before we dive into just the subject, just introduce yourself a little bit, Jarie, for our listeners to get to know who you are, what you do, and then we'll maybe dive more into, kind of the subject matter that brought you to have this conversation.
Sure. Appreciate being on the show. Really excited to talk about this. We don't talk about these sort of things enough. So that's the reason why I'm just excited to be here. So my name is Jarie Bolander. I grew up in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, live here now. Went to school for engineering. So I've got a very engineering mindset, very, I wouldn't say like scientific method-y type of thing. So all problems to me are just waiting for a solution. Over time, I've learned that sometimes I can't solve every problem, as we all know. Nowadays, I do, B2B sales and marketing consulting for a firm here in Berkeley, California called Decision Counsel. So I help companies tell their story. And it's funny because, we have as part of our lives, like different stages of it,
Yeah.
And, writing this book and really figuring out that stage of my life with my late wife, Jane, really opened my eyes to how many different aspects of life we have and how to, I think to your point before we began about community and having discussions. And I really love what you're doing with this, uncomfortable conversations and, trying to move that forward, because I do believe that all of us share just a common humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we can be in fellowship or in conversation or in dialogue, I think the better we all are. So kudos to you and the team and what you're trying to do. Sometimes these are really uncomfortable conversations to have, but they're very important when they're done in a loving, compassionate, and thoughtful way. So
yeah, that's good. Yeah, thanks for sharing. So as you mentioned, I'm guessing writing a book wasn't part of your plan, or especially a memoir about, caring for your late wife and just that journey that you went on with her and being a caregiver and running a business. But just share with us maybe a little bit about you guys' relationship, and then what, her diagnosis was, just that the story that was being written of finding out, those types of things that kind of launched you into being her caregiver and loving her well in her life.
Yeah. So what's funny is right now it's June, so this is Gay Pride Month. And Jane and I first met at a gay pride breakfast, which a lot of people would be like, you never know you're going to meet your next wife at a gay pride breakfast. But one of the reasons we were there is because it was a political breakfast. So here in San Francisco, as you can imagine, there's a strong gay community, or whatever alphabet. I always forget the alphabets, right? But, community that's pretty strong here. And so every politico that wants to run for office goes to these things. And I had a bunch of friends that are like, hey, you should go to this, support our friend that was running for supervisor at the time. And honestly, I really didn't want to go. It was a Sunday at 8 a.m. At the time, I was like newly divorced, which is a whole other conversation to have. And I was actually abusing alcohol pretty heavily to fill the void and the hole in my heart in so many ways. Like, I'm sure people, how hard that can be, and I'm sure counsel people on that as well. But showed up at this breakfast at 8 a.m. and lo and behold, there's Jane. And it wasn't love at first sight or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was more like, oh, this is interesting. And I was broken, to be honest. I'm broken person. And over time, we just started to grow a relationship. And about a year after we met, we got engaged. And about a year and a half later, roughly, we got married, and we were one of those couples, I would say, people knew us in town. We were in the political sphere. Jane was a publicist for professional athletes. I had done some community organizing. We were part of a faith community at that time as well. And so we were going places, like power couple is what people used to say.
Yeah.
And so everything was going great, and we decided, hey, let's have some kids. And so we started trying to have kids, and Jane would having a bunch of miscarriages in a row. She had 2 in a row. And so they're like, yeah, you're 34. Well, this is common, more common than most people know. Sometimes at least half of pregnancies end in miscarriage, and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
But it's a very emotional thing, as you can imagine. And so it was December 26th, 2015. We got a phone call from the hospital, and they said, you need to come to the ER because we need to take some more tests. And this was, great, really? We got to do this again? Because we've been doing this for the better part of a couple of months. And got to the ER, and they sat us in a room, and they basically said, we think you have leukemia. And to say that wasn't a sucker punch to the gut, is, an understatement, right? So for the better part of 15 months, she battled it. And she ended up dying April 3rd, 2017 from leukemia. And during that 15-month time, which I write about in the book, is basically the book's about our relationship and obviously predominantly about that time and kind of how we dealt with it. We went from power couple going out on the town to I'm your caregiver. I need to run your business. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And just to be completely frank, scared to death.
Yeah.
Right. So, what's interesting is that when you say your vows, right? Sickness and health till death do you part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone says them, but no one really knows what they mean until you got to put these into practice. Right. And so that's what I had to do. And anyone that's ever had to take care of a spouse or a sick, a mother or father knows that the dynamics of the relationship change when you're now a caregiver to this person. And that happened to us. And navigating that was a huge loss of a lot of different things. But what was really special about that time, and it sounds weird to say it now, and you might think, God, what good could come of it? What could be special about dealing with this, transformational event that, you may lose your spouse over? Because we really captured each day. And even if it was frustrating, and even if it was like, oh God, we got to go to another chemo appointment, you got to be in the hospital for another 5 weeks, we got to do a bone marrow transplant. It's like we were in it together in a way that just was so connecting and so transformational. I mean, the reason why the book's called Ride or Die is because that's what we would say to each other all the time. It's like, well, we're in it to win it. This is not, no matter how this ends, I'm with you all the way.
Yeah.
And it was just powerful to feel that. And it was also powerful to help someone you love very deeply through a tough time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Obviously, it's not, like you said, it's not something you sign up for. We do give those vows. I've done dozens of weddings and you lead people through that, but not with the, especially that early. Not that there's ever 5 years, 10 years, 20 years that it makes it easier to go through. There's different layers, but that quickly, into, making those vows, being healthy and all those kinds of things, thinking about dreaming about life together to kind of be introduced to a nightmare like that is yeah. Thanks for just taking the time to process and share that. So what did it go like? What was it like? You said you're running a business and she was doing business stuff and all of that gets put on hold. So what did just life look like trying to manage those things? You can't fully just quit your job or not have any kind of income. Helping people, the health, paying for all that kind of stuff is just another whole conversation. But what did it look like to start running a business, trying to care for her stuff, and then also be a full-time caregiver for someone you love?
Yeah. I mean, at the time I was at a startup. We were a digital health company trying to track the temperature and location of perishable medical supplies so they wouldn't spoil.
Okay.
So basically I had to put that on hold. I mean, my part of it, my business partners sort of took the reins on that. And literally overnight, I became a PR maven, which I didn't know anything about. Like PR marketing, that's what she did. So literally my first act as, doing this was a press conference for the 50th Super Bowl with a group called No Traffic Ahead, which was about human trafficking.
Yeah.
And my job is to pull this thing together. And I had no idea what I'm doing. And Jane's like, oh, I'll help you. I go, but I'm the publicist, right? So to put that in perspective, No Traffic Ahead was a group of maybe 60, 70 organizations across the entire Bay Area, law enforcement, faith groups, services, trying to just raise up the idea that human trafficking is everywhere, and the Super Bowl brings that out, right? So I was clueless. I was really clueless. And I'm pretty good at, prioritizing and executing things. And so it became literally 2 full-time jobs. So 1, I have to run our business, and 2, I have to be at every appointment. Thankfully we had family that would help out. We had a huge community, which I think is one thing I learned, is that community is so important.
Yeah.
That is just critical to surviving any kind of thing like this, because without community, I just would feel lost. We had created this thing called the Care Circle, which we give updates, like very, very powerful that way. So it was literally 12 to 15 hour days every day. I'd go to work, then I'd come home. I would either come home to our apartment or I'd come home to the hospital. I'd get Jane up to speed. She'd get me up to speed on treatment. If there was an appointment, I would sometimes work from the hospital when she was there. Thankfully, we had, flexibility because we're running our own business. So if I could set my own schedule, but for 15 months, it was just nonstop 24/7. And I sometimes don't understand. I still today, like, how did I get through that? And I think part of it was family, community, and honestly, how Jane handled it. She was extremely brave and extremely thoughtful and like worried about me. It's like, yeah, I'm facing this life-threatening disease. I could die. And she's like, yeah, I think you're going to be upset if I'm dead. I'm like, yeah, I will be. Like, what? We even had in the book, we have a fight about this in the book, which is a pretty pivotal moment. But the one thing I did learn was just a day at a time. A lot of people, you hear that trope and that saying all the time, but it's like, chop the wood in front of you. Like, okay, what do I have to do today? Like what appointment, what business thing? And I think that was just also some training I had, some endurance events training. And again, even though it felt lonely at times, I knew that people were out there that were like rooting for us and trying to help us. So,
yeah. So let's talk about maybe a few of those circles, like friends, family, community. How did those things help Maybe you can go each of those separately if you'd like, or address them kind of all corporately. But how did community, what were some of the ways community and family played a big role in just supporting before, during, after this journey?
Yeah, I think before, what was really powerful is, before I met Jane, I didn't have a ton of friends. Generally introverted and focused on career, and didn't really have like a social group. I mean, I had friends because I was doing community organizing, but I didn't really have a community that was, connected around something, like either endurance events or whatever. And so Jane really helped me understand, okay, look, building the community is important. She had a lot of friends. They became my friends. And we just had this shared experience. People, we were at, everyone was trying to have kids, or everyone was, in their careers or whatever it was. But there was this camaraderie, right? Which I think is a powerful thing to build, because you can't really build that when you're in it, oh, all of a sudden I need all this help. And, you just don't show up, right? You got to put the work in. So building that solid foundation was pretty important. I think during the whole thing, and family was important too, in that sense. She has, had a pretty tight-knit family, and, they had an extended family. And so, they would help out a lot during the time as well. So I think one of the things that I think is pretty critical to understand is that community is like any, you can have a community of anything, right? And it's usually a shared experience where people want to be together and they have common interests or whatever. And we had a lot of different communities. We just, I was in the startup community. She was in the PR community. Like I said before, I had been part of a faith community. I had an endurance community. So we had all these people around us and family and stuff like that. And each one plays a role. And I think that the role is not so much you're taking from them, but you're gaining this shared experience, as well as this, I could actually rely on someone if something went wrong. I mean, there's great examples of friends and family just stepping up and, watching Jane or going to the hospital or whatever, right? So it was really powerful, during the whole thing. After she died was even more critical for me specifically.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine I didn't handle it well. I drank a lot. I'm not proud of that, but now I'm sober. So I'm 5 years plus sober. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was transformative, and partly the good that honestly came out of it. I know it sounds silly, but there was some good. My experience after, although, community was important, and was still lonely in the sense that no one could really relate to what I was going through. And I'd gone to the grief groups, and, I go to therapy and counseling and, talk to people, and I don't know, just the male perspective on that just didn't seem to either be out there or resonate with me, or I couldn't find it. And so sometimes it felt lonely, but even then I just knew, well, you know what? There's people there that love me. They may not say it. They may not know what to do. They may be awkward. They may say the wrong thing, or they may be like, oh, sorry for your loss. And then you're like, okay, can we not talk about that? But I knew in my gut, in my heart, that these people cared about me. Yeah. And I think that got me through a lot of it. And I think the other thing that got me through a lot of it is the conversations that Jane and I had about, the tough, you talk about uncomfortable conversation. Imagine talking to your 36-year-old wife saying, yeah, well, you better find happiness after I'm dead, or I'm going to haunt you, or something crazy like that. Because, that gift made it so much easier. And so that I always remember that. And in fact, I get a little choked up talking about it, because it was such a gift that I only hope I can do that when faced with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm curious, just going through that and being on the other side, because I think a lot of times as people are grieving and lamenting over loss and pain, one of the things that makes it tough is just people are awkward. People don't know what to say. People either say not enough. Some people say too much. Are there just like maybe examples or things like that? You're like, hey, I would give advice to somebody that's grieving. Here's some things that are helpful to say. And here's some things maybe I know you mean well, but just not the best tropes or not the best things to say to somebody grieving. Are there any thoughts that you have in your process? And love to hear just some of those, because I think it's one of those things we don't talk about because it is uncomfortable and it's weird, it's awkward, but then we're all going to be facing situations dealing with people with grief, and so it's just helpful to learn some of those tips, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you as a pastor, like birth, wedding, death, and all in between.
Yeah.
Actually, what's interesting is the faith community is a lot more prepared for things like this. Because they think about it. I'm sure you've had to deal with these in the past. In fact, there's a great story in the book about a chaplain that befriended Jane in the hospital. And Jane wasn't religious at all. She was of Asian descent. Her parents were from Taiwan, so they would like a mix of, they're like Buddhists, but not really, mostly cultural Buddhists. But this chaplain just was the kindest person, and was there, and when I wasn't there. And it was funny because after she met the chaplain, I remember this day, it's in the book too, she's just like, the chaplain gave her a little stuffed animal to make her have comfort. And I got back from work and I'm like, walk in, and she's just like, here's our new son, Greenie, with a little green frog. And I'd like you to say a prayer to him. And I'm like, well, where did this come from? Because she'd never done this before, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is interesting is, the dynamics of all these sort of things, people can say that they're, different religions. But what's funny is like there was something in her that thought that there's something beyond her, and that we should acknowledge that. And again, you could say whatever you want about that, but it's like, oh, this is really powerful. So we did that. And then, and I bring that up because a lot of times people, they say things that I don't think are helpful in that context. The most common was, I'm sorry for your loss. Okay. That's just a platitude. I understand you don't know what to say. I'd avoid that. I would avoid they're in a better place because they should be with me. I'm sorry. That may be controversial, but look, I'd rather have them here, honestly. And I know why people do that. And I know there's some people find comfort in that. And I don't think I think the ones that are the most useful and the most helpful, and I've talked to a lot of widows and widowers and people that have lost, is acknowledging that's horrible. What a horrible thing. I'm so sorry. It's a horrible thing to have to go through. That is powerful because it's true. It's horrible. No matter who you are, it's like, this is horrible. I think the other thing that helps a lot is to be truly interested in the person that's died. So one of the things I always do if someone says, my husband died or I lost my husband, I say, oh, what was their name? And the reason is because you want to remember them.
Yeah.
Right? It's funny because we do forget. So I always ask, what was their name? What did you like about them? What did you hate about them? Because to me, that shows a level of curiosity. And if I don't want to, talk about it, I don't want to talk about it. Or the other thing, and some people have done this too, which I would really appreciate it, and I know took a lot of courage. One of my friends is like, I have no idea how to help you. I want to. I have no clue. And I'm sorry. And I know this sucks. And I love you, and I want to help you, but I don't know what to do. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Yeah. I don't even know either.
Yeah. Right?
So I think those types, it's uncomfortable. I even have a hard time with this. I've been through it, right? And, again, I think what's interesting about, pastors, rabbis, chaplains, is that they're trained in this. So they know better, and there's some comfort in that. But I think as a normal human walking around on the planet, I would say you could admit that you don't know what to do. I think saying that's horrible what happened to you is fine. I think that's a good one to start with. And then I would be curious about the person that died. I mean, if you know them, you could just swap a nice story or a funny story. I mean, I can't tell you how many great stories I heard about Jane. I mean, I heard a lot of good ones because she was a character.
Yeah.
But, when I would bring it up and people were awkward, and I'd be like, they would have some funny story, and we would just laugh. We just laugh and be like, oh, I miss her, but thank you for making it a little less painful for me.
Yeah. And yeah, definitely keeping those memories alive is a big part of it. So what kind of advice, I guess, you gave some maybe words to not share and words to share, I think, that are helpful. But I think especially men, we like to keep our emotions a little more closeted, and we like to, just be like, I'm fine, I'm good. Things are good. And just kind of move on and, brush that off. And like you said, maybe a vice you turned to, and that was alcohol because of that. But what advice do you give to men, especially on grieving and helping them understand the challenges of grieving? What are some of the healthful choices to make when grieving, and maybe some more of the damaging, like you said, you're not proud of it, but it might lead to, it looks like it's freedom, it looks like it's giving you more opportunity, but it actually led to probably more bondage in your life to go into alcohol. So what advice would you give to men, especially in this process of grief?
Yeah. It's really hard to express yourself emotionally as a man. I always like to say it's okay for women to cry, but not men. And it's okay for men to get angry, but not women. And since fundamentally we're human and we have both of those emotions, not being able to express them is just going to do long-term damage.
Yeah.
And my upbringing was exactly what you said: suck it up, walk it off. I'm a Gen Xer. Like,
yeah,
the cavalry's not coming for us.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you got hit in the head or hit in the groin. Walk it off, son. It's like, I can't. I want to cry.
Yeah.
I think for men in particular, it's important to have trusted friends that you can talk to about it. And honestly, sometimes you can't talk about it. And I think that's one of the things that people get bent out of shape about, because especially, let's say, there's a woman in your life and, sister, mother, friend, or whatever, and you're the man that's grieving, and they're like, let's talk about it. And you're like, I don't want to talk about it. And then they get all upset because you're not sharing. Well, sorry, but sometimes talking about it makes it worse. And I'm not saying at some point you won't talk about it, but there's clinical evidence, there's studies that show that if you talk about it too soon, you're reliving the trauma. And that's not good either. That's just going to make you drink more or whatever. And I'm not saying that, hey, again, I'm not proud of it, but sometimes you do what you got to do to get through the day. And I thankfully I didn't do it in an irresponsible way. I basically drank myself to sleep, which was still not good for me, but I wasn't driving drunk or, doing, again, I'm not proud of that, but that was my own coping mechanism at the time. I think it's good for men to have other men they can share these experiences with. Thankfully, that's what happened with me. I had some really good friends that just got it, and they just listened to me. And then some of them were like, you know what, we don't have to talk about this. Let's just talk about stupid stuff. I think that's part of it, being like, just being who you are. But I would say, if you're in the acute phase of grief, you just lost your partner, your child, or lost someone you really loved, and you're trying to figure out how to express yourself, I would say it's okay to not talk about it. Talk about it when you're ready, and people need to be okay with that. I personally got a therapist, And that helped me be able to express these emotions in a safe space. I found really good friends that I could talk to about it, and they were kind and considerate. And over time, I got to the point where I can be on a podcast talking about my late wife, Jane, and wrote a book. Like, that's how far I've come. And I'm also comfortable with showing emotion and tearing up and, crying in public, because I'm like, look, this is who I am. I can't change that.
Yeah.
But a lot of men have a problem with that, and I can appreciate that. So one of the other things that worked really well for me was physical activity. And there's studies that suggest that this is really good too, that do something physical, like move your body, get out of the house, distract yourself just a little bit so you can, what my physical activity was 3 weeks after Jane died, I started jujitsu. And I'm like, hard to feel sad and hard to be in a pity party when someone's trying to choke you out.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I think you need some distractions, and that's okay. And you know what? You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. And don't have anyone make you do that. And don't feel guilty if you're not talking about it right away. And the people that want you to talk about it, they make you feel guilty. That's not cool either. So the other thing that's comforting is, your spiritual leader, talking to your spiritual leader. I have some friends that are pastors and rabbis, and we talk with them. And again, they're trained. So that's good. Like, they know what they're talking about and they understand, and, they're thoughtful people, and generally they've been through it before, so they kind of know what to do. And then I think over time, I would challenge you to talk about it in public. I would challenge you to share your experience, because more men need to do that. Reason why I'm on this show is I want to share that. I want to say, look, it's okay. If you're going through this, it's tough, it's horrible, it sucks. You can get through it. Here's how I did it. I'm not perfect. And, 6 years after she died, I can talk about it, and I still get emotional. I mean, I don't think I'll ever not get emotional, right? About it. I think we need to have these conversations, and men, honestly, got to step up, share your full self. Don't bury it. The reason why I drank so much was because I was burying the emotion, and I needed to feed the hole in my heart, right?
Yeah.
It's common, I'm not unique in this, but once I freed that up, and once I liberated that, I didn't need to fill it.
Yeah.
I'm a lot better off.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I often, like you said, I get the privilege, though it's painful, of walking through just these sacred moments with, a lot of people. And it is a joy, a painful joy, but to walk through some of these most sensitive moments with people. And one of the things I'll never forget, my son kind of everyone's going to have their first experience with death, whether it's a puppy or a goldfish or a human. I'll never forget going to a funeral with my son, and he didn't have a connection to this person that deeply, but he was there, and he's like, Dad, why do I feel sad right now? Like, just, and I was trying to help him understand that our grief is a reality, that this isn't what we were made for. Like, death is not, we were not made for death. That I believe that we are made for life forever. And now there's this thing called sin that's entered the world, and that messes all of that up. And so I would explain to him, like, grief is your emotion saying this isn't right. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm doing a funeral for a stillborn that never really got to take much life, or somebody that's 95 and they lived a full good life. No one at those funerals are like, this is what was supposed to happen. Those emotions remind us of that. But I think, some of what you shared reminds me of the reality that we have to become people in our society at large that say, me too. Like, we've got a mental health crisis happening, and a lot of it is because we are people, and maybe it's the being raised in the, hey, you're okay, dust it off, wipe the dirt off, and you'll be okay mentality. But if we don't actually let those emotions out that we were created with, that I think are God-given, that lead us towards good and healthy places if we channel them right. If we don't ever say me too, then it makes us feel alone, like makes us feel like I'm the only one going through this, and then we start to spin these cycles in our brain. And often, I'll share, I recently was doing a funeral for someone who died by suicide, and one of the things I shared at that was it was painful, but we have an opportunity as people to say me too. And I don't think we do that enough. Like I shared that I know the 90 minutes before guests come over to my house is going to be the craziest 90 minutes in the world, because what we're going to do is yell at our kids, and we're going to clean every bathroom. We're going to vacuum we're going to make it look like our house is not lived in for everybody that's coming over. Right. And we do that with our souls a lot, right? Like we like to present it as like, there's not really a person in here. There's not really a person with emotions. Nobody actually lives here. There's no emotions. There's no mess going on here. And we do that with our own lives and present ourselves just like our living room, perfect and polished, as if it's that way all the time. And it does everybody a disservice when we live lives, like that. It does everybody a service. It does us a disservice to just act like nobody's actually living here. There's not real emotion. There's not real mess. There's not real trauma. There's not real stuff that's happening here. And so sometimes we live lives kind of like we present our living room. It's like it's perfect. It's always manicured. Every picture is always looking good, and the pillows are always fluffed. And just encouraging people, and I even having this conversation with you is a great reminder that we need to. And what you're doing is saying, man, there weren't enough people, not enough men saying me too, that I could go find solace and comfort in their stories. And so what you're doing is a great way to say that. So other men who have gone through the same kind of thing, writing this book is kind of raising your hand and saying, hey, me too. I've been through this. You can make it through this. There's hope on the other side of this. And just having another story to attach to and connect to in community makes us not feel so isolated, makes us feel like, yes, other people are going through this and there's hope at the end of it. Doesn't mean everything gets better. Doesn't mean the loss doesn't go away, but there's just something powerful about being able to grieve in community with someone saying me too. So I love, what you're doing here, and especially seeing that void. Because as I do walk through these conversations a lot, there's not as much, out there that are resources for men to be able to process with, and safe spaces or people saying me too. So I really appreciate you doing that, Jarie, and I think it's going to be something that helps a lot of other people identify with. Are there other thoughts that you have that things that you'd like to make sure you share before about this? I'll give you an opportunity to share more about, your book and what's coming up then, and how people can access it here when it comes out. But are there thoughts that you think are pertinent to just this conversation? Anything else you want to share about Jane, before we sign off here?
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the things that Jane wanted me to do is find love again, which is a powerful gift. I can't express how much. And I did. So I'm engaged to a wonderful woman who has a daughter. And so soon, I'll be a stepfather trying to navigate that. It's a little bit
another
weird,
thing to navigate. Yeah.
Yeah. But beautiful thing, and I think that's the thing that is so important is I was open to that. And the reason I was open to that is because we had the conversation. Jane and I had the conversation about it. And I think that's just a testament to being, no matter how painful it can be, is to have the hope that, look, you love someone dearly, they love you back, they want you to be happy, you know? And one of the other things that was really powerful is, one of the reasons I stopped drinking, other than it's just bad for me and that wasn't helping, is that it really wouldn't allow me to lead my full life, not only for myself, but to honor Jane. Jane was 36 when she died. It's too young. I mean, clearly, right? Like, so much life to live. And I just realized that I actually have a responsibility. And those vows, sickness and health, to death do us part, those never go away. is what I realized. I still have to honor that, even if I get married again, having this new love, because that commitment is something that's so powerful, and also her legacy in certain sense. So I was just lucky to find love again. I mean, how lucky am I? Yeah. And living my full life and being happy and like contributing and helping people get through. That's what Jane would want too. And I know she'd be very proud of me for what I'm doing, and that makes me feel good as well. So I think that's the only really other thing I'd add is, yeah, it's hard now, but if you get better every day and you like really try and be thoughtful, things get better. Get better.
Well, thanks again for sharing that. And I'm sure we just dipped our toes into the water on this conversation and you guys' full story. So if somebody does want to, read that, it's resonating with them, they want to use this as a resource, they're another, male or female, kind of going through the same thing. Tell us a little bit about when your book will be available, your memoir, maybe some of the easier ways to get it, or if there's somebody that wants to get in contact with you and share their story or say thank you or say me too. What are the best ways to contact you?
Yeah, so the book will be available September 5th, as you said. On Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org. If you're into independent book stores, as I am, that was one of the things Jane and I shared, was we loved books and independent bookstores. So happens my fiance Minerva loves books in independent bookstore. So got to throw that out to shop local and help those folks out. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. Just Instagram is my name, Jarie Bolander. JarieBolander.com is my author site, which my publicist wanted me to do, so I did.
Yeah.
Those are just ways to get a hold of me. I really don't know like how this is all gonna like blossom out. But really do just want to stress that if you're struggling with this as a man, or if you love a man that's struggling with this, I really do think at least reading how I handled it, how Jane handled it, how our community handled it, I think will give you a glimpse and a little bit about what they may be going through. Because one of the things that's hard to understand is what's going on in his head. Because no one talks about it, as you said. So now we can talk about it. And some people have said, well, I really don't want to talk with you about it. Or I've heard, well, it might be sad for you. No, I wrote a whole book about it. I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So, no excuses anymore.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. And I'm going to sign off to our folks here. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you want to contact us anytime, you can email us podcast@cccomaha.org. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, CCCOMA podcast, or call us and leave a voicemail like we shared about earlier. Those are always fun to play on the show and hear from you. Again, if you want to be part of that book club, the Uncomfortable Book Club, shoot us that email at that podcast@cccomaha.org. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.